Hey, I want to make a quick video and show one of the big things I got done this week on Liminal, and that was adding CDNs. I added two actually. One for assets, so think like JavaScript and style sheets, and then one for my public S3 bucket, so a CDN in front of that for any public storage. And so you can see that here in inspecting the page. I've got this CloudFront CDN for style sheets, and then a different one here for these avatars. And the way you see that in the way I'm setting that up in production, you can specify an asset host. And here I'm just setting a asset CDN environment variable for that. And then for my storage, actually I have a couple S3 buckets. One is for anything public that I'm not concerned about anyone having access to, and that would be like the icons for a space or the avatars for users. So public set to true here, and then I put a public CDN in front of that that I'm referencing. And the way I do that, actually, this is probably the interesting part, but before I get into that, the thing I often do when I'm doing this kind of thing, this kind of task, is look to see what blog posts are out there. And since I don't set up CDNs very often, I followed a few guides and I thought I'd mention them. So this is Prasant's article on the Saloon blog, going into how to set up CloudFront CDN. Ollie Heady has a blog post on his site that I used as well. Jonathan on Bibliographic Wilderness has this blog post. And then two blog posts more recent on the Avo blog by Ezekiel. And there's one for each for both setting up the asset CDN and one for managing active storage uploads. Although my approach to this is different. And that actually comes from Justin Searle's blog post a couple months back here. And he takes a different approach for the S3 bucket, a CD in front of the S3 bucket. And that really comes from this idea here, which is instead of using the built-in active storage, either proxy or redirect modes for for active storage attachments, he sets up a route where he can call the public CDN URL. And if the active storage service is set to Amazon, then just call the CDN host directly with the key for that blob. And this ended up being the way I wanted to go, rather than what I realized is, especially for something like, okay, for this page, we get a request for the page load, and then for each of these icons, it's making another request back to the app to the redirect endpoint to then load what was originally the S3 bucket URL, but then I could use a CDN, but it's still having to run through the app if I'm doing that. So what I think is better is if you've got a CDN in front of your bucket and you know the blob key, you can just reference it directly. And so that's what I'm doing here. So when you look at these, that's what's happening here. And the only issue with that is if you go to upload a new avatar here, for example, as soon as you hit upload, all right, that took a second, but as soon as you hit upload, the variant that you're using for the attachment may not have been generated yet. And so if you use this approach here where you're referencing the CDN, the public CDN directly, this blob key may not exist yet. So upon upload, you might get a broken image. So I was kind of stuck by that for a little bit, trying to figure out what to do. And I realized that what I could do in my avatar component is check to see if that key for the variant existed or not, and then use the public CDN URL if it does. Otherwise, fall back to the default, which is the redirect endpoint. And in that case, it will generate upon the first request. So that's what I'm doing here. If the user has an avatar that's attached and variable, meaning it has variants to it, which all with images do have that, then I'm going to use the image tag. I have a fallback to the default, which is like your initial and a color. But for this, I'm checking. I've just got a method here. I'll probably extract this and put this somewhere else. I'm not sure. I love how this works, but I'm checking to see if my avatar, if I have the variant thumb for this avatar, if that key is present, that blob key is present. If it is, then I'm going to use the public CDN URL. And if it's not, I'll fall back to the redirect. So that solves this issue where if you upload a new avatar, as soon as the page reloads, you'd get a broken link if that blob key hadn't been created yet on the bucket. So instead, it uses the redirect. So it's a little bit slower loading that first time, but it works. And then, so if you check this, actually, you'll see it's using the active storage representations redirect URL here for the first load. But if I reload, check it again, it's using the CDN now. And so that feels like maybe the best of both worlds. And I do really like this approach, and I'll probably be using it more often in the future for any assets that I intend to be public that I don't need any restrictions on. I also am doing that I am using something similar to that for my attachments, where I want screenshots and files that are uploaded onto a post body. I want them not to be accessible outside of access to that space, especially for private spaces, I guess. So images like this will be loaded and will run through a special endpoint that I have. I guess you can't see it here, but I do have a special endpoint that will load attachments in and check authorization for the specific space that you're in. And those go into a separate S3 bucket that is not public and requires the secret or whatever for that. So anyway, I'm pretty happy about that. I think this is a good solution, and I'd like to see more people use it. But that's kind of how I set up CDNs this week. Thanks.